Rose? A rose by any other name.
Oh, this is
How are
nice.
you tonight?
I'm good. I saw you and I knew you hadn't done a live for a long time, so I didn't want to
Yeah.
bug you and say, invite me, invite me, invite me. So you must have just got my telepathic message.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. You can say that any day of the week, yo. You're on the inner
Oh,
circle as far as I'm concerned. If you're like here, I'm gonna be like, let's go. Let's go, Rose. Let's do it. Let's do the thing.
yeah, cool. Well, this is an interesting turn of events. Is this something that you do usually,
What?
or is it a once every year or something with the whole having some cathartic, like sitting in your feelings?
Oh, no, 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 no. This is something I do like on the weekly. I just don't do it in
Yeah,
public most of the time.
yeah,
I had a friend
yeah.
ask me how I seem so emotionally regulated, and I said a very, very consistent crying practice. And he said,
Okay.
"How are we so alike?" And I realized in that moment that he had never told anyone that he actually takes time out of his week to intentionally sit in his feels until they come out of his eyes. And
Hmm.
it is cathartic. It's maintenance. It is changing the oil, emotionally speaking.
Yeah.
So
I'm
I don't do
learning
that.
I'm
I,
learning to conjure this kind of
yeah.
stuff, but after a long life of suppressing
Mm-hmm.
and not dealing with trauma because life was
Mm.
very busy and intense, and I was
Mm.
deferring my emotions to taking care of other people.
Right.
But I would
Right.
find that minor things would set me off, like missing a train or
Mm.
something. And once the tears start, it's like I worry that I won't ever stop crying. I have the big ugly cry for about half an hour, and that happens, or that has happened throughout my life, probably once every two
Yeah.
years. One thing will just set me off. And it's
Yeah.
like you get all that oxytocin too. It's like having an orgasm. You feel great afterwards. You feel
Oh
really,
yeah.
really good. And I think maybe I've channeled a lot of the emotion that I should be getting out in tears. I think I've channeled that into sex. I kind of realized belatedly in
Mm.
life that I was using sex as a cathartic thing a
Right. An
lot of the
emotional
time.
expression in a way that
Yeah,
because
because
you
I'm
couldn't
very
express your
loud.
emotions in other ways. I mean, if the neighbors can't hear it, are you even doing it right? This is empty.
Right?
Yeah. No. I as a kid, I was always very emotional. And as a boy, I was always taught that I wasn't allowed to be. And you
Yeah,
know how that goes.
yeah.
So crying in private became something that happened very often just because I had a lot to cry about. I had a lot to cry about in my life. There didn't have to be something that would invoke it. It was always just there. You can
Yeah.
feel at the bottom of your throat, you can feel behind your eyes, you can feel that there is something that needs to get cried out. For whatever reason, I was never okay to just let that sit and fester. And so I don't remember a time in my life that I wasn't looking forward to my next private cry,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I
And I
am I
still
envy
continue to
that
this day.
because the last time I had the it was actually a precipitation to doing some healing. It was about 3 years ago, and I had a huge breakdown at work, and I just had to um, go and take my time and actually say I need to go home. And like normally you'd
Mm,
soldier on, but I was like, no, this is stuff that I need. You know, I have.
yeah.
I was actually able to tell people I'm having a mental health crisis.
Uh huh.
Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
coming out as having childhood trauma, anxiety, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And because people see you cope most of the time, they're like, okay, you know, they don't really
Mm-hmm.
know how to deal with this version of who you are.
Right.
And I thought there should be a way of marketing. I know there's primal scream therapy and stuff like that, but it'd be good if there was a pressure point or something in the body that you could trigger genuine tears with. Because sometimes
Like
I'll
a
watch a
gag reflex.
movie and that'll loosen a few tears, but for
Mm.
the most part, um, when I'm sad, I think I shouldn't be sad. I think that's the human
Ah.
condition. We tell people that depression is a bad thing or sadness is a bad
Yeah.
thing when it's all part of that loop.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I was just I was the type of person where if there was something that I wasn't supposed to do, how I interpreted that was I'm only supposed to do it when no one's watching. You know, like
Yeah.
you grow up, you get punished for doing the bad stuff, you get rewarded for doing the good stuff, and that doesn't teach you not to do the bad stuff, it teaches you not to get caught, right? And it was the same thing with all the societal inhibitions that were placed upon me. Anything that societally I was told was not okay, I refused to believe it wasn't okay. I just had to not get caught. I wasn't allowed to get caught crying or feeling or emoting. And so I did it on my own.
Because when I think about my children and how I feel about them and how I'd love to be able to feel those feelings in a actual visceral way, I'm so afraid of them because I think those feelings are going to overwhelm me. Then what?
Maybe they should. Maybe they should. Because what I've discovered is, can I read you a story? Can I read you a quick story?
Absolutely. I love your stories. It's daytime, but I'll pretend it's bedtime.
When something happens that would invoke tears, the energy of those tears stays with us until we cry them out. And what I found is that if I have an event that would invoke tears and I don't cry them, they stay here. Another event that would invoke tears and I don't cry them, they stay here. Event, until one little tiny event happens where I can't hold them in. It's like in the cartoons when they hold the edge of the hose and it builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up and they let go and it all comes out. And this little event would invoke tears, and I do cry those tears, and these 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 tears.
They're all lining up.
I've been holding it back my entire life. I don't know where the end of that train is. And so I'm afraid that I'm just going to never stop crying. And so what I'll do is I'll make a concerted effort to cry every single one of those tears. So when this happens, the only tears that are there to be cried are these. But in order to get there, I have to have already cried all these other tears. There was one time that didn't happen. Because some tears hurt to cry.
Is this your book?
This is my book.
Just putting it out there, this is your book.
This is called The Fight.
Okay.
And I can already tell I'm going to cry reading this, so we're going to get through it together.
Pass it to me and I'll read.
This is about 3.5 pages long, so it's a really short one. No grown man wakes up and thinks, I'd like to cry in front of my boss's boss at work today. Imagine my surprise, embarrassment, and frustration when my body just decided to go ahead and make that happen anyway. She was addressing the fact that several people had commented on how I was doodling during meetings instead of taking notes or looking into the eyes of whoever was speaking. I explained that looking at faces was distracting and that my doodles were my notes, that I could draw a single image while listening to an hour-long lecture and then retrace that drawing with a chopstick after the fact and recite the entire thing with near-perfect accuracy. She didn't buy it. Upon being instructed not to doodle during meetings anymore, I couldn't keep my eyes from leaking. Yes, this dug up all the frustration of being an adult with undiagnosed ADHD, being told yet again that there was something wrong with me simply because I functioned differently than neurotypical people. But these weren't those tears. This was digging up something much, much deeper. In various chapters throughout my life, my father taught martial arts to my brother and me. Mostly it was a class or dojo type setting. Other times it was like private tutoring, with just the three of us in our garage. It was never about winning fights, it was always about ending them, preferably before they began. Speaking of fights ending, the Vietnam War ended on April 30th, 1975, and the surviving troops went home. Yes, that came out of left field, yes, it will all make sense, and yes, things are about to get turbulent. One night, on a routine run to drop wounded soldiers off at a nearby base for medical attention, a medevac pilot named Benedicto was hit by anti-air artillery and died on impact when his helicopter crashed into the ground below. His younger brother Augustine was a Spec Ops paratrooper, the kind who would drop behind enemy lines and do the types of things you come home from war not wanting to talk about. Ben was survived by his wife Eva and their 3 sons. As per Hawaiian culture, when the war ended, Gus came home. He married Eva to help raise the boys, taking on a marriage to a woman he didn't love, a fatherly role to the boys he didn't conceive, and alcohol as his only coping mechanism for crippling PTSD. He brought the war home. When my father was 3 years old, Grandpa Gus slammed his head into a piece of furniture, leaving a permanent scar just above his eye. These were the fires that forged my father. This was the model of manhood he was given, and follow this model he did. He followed it so well, in fact, that my older brother got a matching eye scar when he was 3. You'd think that would have been my dad's wake-up call, watching himself do the exact thing to his son that his father had done to him. Unfortunately, the abuse lasted another 10 years. One Saturday morning, while my brother and I were getting our weekly martial arts training, I was in the mood to do literally anything else. While my brother was doing his best to absorb the teaching, I was doing my best to distract him with funny faces and fart noises. That is, until I heard my dad say, "Okay, boys, time to show me what you've learned." As my brother and I took our places on the mat, I figured I'd access prior training, power my way through a quick sparring sesh with little more than a few bumps and bruises, and call it a day. We'd struck our fighting stances. My dad said, "Fight," and we started the dance. I kept up pretty well until he threw a move I'd never seen. I didn't know which part of him hit which part of me, but as I picked myself up off the floor, I realized I'd just been on the receiving end of whatever I was supposed to have been learning this whole time. I shook it off and assumed the position. Again, my father barked. We danced. I was looking for it this time, but to no avail. Somehow I hit the floor sooner and harder than the first time. Reset. Again. Dance. Floor. Reset. Again. Dance. Floor. This was getting old. Like that one kid who wins all the video games, I could see it was becoming less and less fun for my brother as well. It wasn't every day that he got an opportunity to beat up on me without getting in trouble for it, but after a few dozen rounds it seemed to have lost its appeal. With a face that said, "Come on, dude, serve it back so he'll see that you learned the thing and we can go play," he started going easy on me. He let me get a few tags in and then looked at my dad to see if we could be finished. We all knew this wouldn't be over until I demonstrated that I had learned the new technique, which we all knew I had no idea what the fuck this technique was, even after having it used on me for the past half hour. At one point, I decided I had hit the floor for the last time. I wasn't getting up. He told me to get up, and I just lay there and cried. But there was something about the sight of that man sternly closing the distance between us that had a way of motivating me to do just about anything. So I got up. Again. Floor. Again. Floor. Again. Floor. I begged my dad to let us stop. He looked at me and said, "Again." I begged my brother to stop. I believe he sincerely wished he could, but feared what might happen to him if he did. He looked at our dad, who simply returned his gaze and growled through gritted teeth, "Again." I don't remember how long this went on or how it ended. I'm sure I'd been pushed to the point of failure and physically couldn't get up even if I wanted to. After that, I started paying attention, not just to martial arts, but to everything. If I wasn't already hyper-vigilant by that point, you can bet your ass I was from that point on. It's funny how our bodies store our traumas behind lock and key. And these keys are usually some combination of things we experienced in the midst of the most traumatic moments we went through. For me, the key to this particular trauma is the simple experience of having someone in a position of authority question whether or not I'm paying attention to something they deem important. And when the key fits, I find myself crying in my boss's office over some doodles on a notebook. Only the tears were never about those doodles. And so I lived the rest of my days at that company, taking notes and making eye contact during meetings and not hearing a damn word anyone said, because once upon a time, my dad made my brother beat me up in our garage. Sometimes I find that I still cry those tears, but at least I know that I'm crying them. So when something happens in my day-to-day life that would invoke a reasonable amount of tears, I know that a reasonable amount of tears is what will come out, because the floodgates have already been opened in a controlled environment that was safe for me.
Yeah. You're looking after little Ryan now.
Yeah. I am fathering my childhood self in the way that he always deserved and never got.
Absolutely.
I would love to see what would happen if you allowed yourself in private to cry every tear that's in there.
I've got a day planned, actually, because the 28th of this month is the, get this, 50th anniversary of my brother passing away.
Oh my
in
God.
a car accident at the age of 30. He
Wow.
left behind a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. I was 10. And the fallout from that reverberated throughout the rest of my life.
Mm.
But a lot of what I stored up, experienced, and whatever is the way my parents behaved, the way my mother behaved. They were both, yeah, it was a very unstable environment.
Yeah.
And there was stuff that happened that was psychologically terrible. Yeah, my mum just completely lost it. And obviously, you lose your child, her eldest child. Obviously, I'm empathetic to that. But from the youngest age, I could never process my grief over losing my brother, who was my hero at that time. He was 20 years older than me. You
were holding space for her.
And, well, just dealing. It was just so much dealing. There was dealing anyway. Their marriage was a nightmare anyway. But then they split up for a while, so it was a whole other nightmare.
Man.
And she was very controlling and tried to make us take sides and got violent towards us. My mother got violent towards us. My father was violent towards her before that. So it was, and I'm youngest of 6, but it was 5 when he died. And we all experienced that fallout in different ways, but I was the youngest. And I could only go by other people's example.
Right.
And yeah, I just had the stereotypical acting out kind of teenage life and young life, and married the wrong people and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
But you look back and you go, this made me who I am today. But sometimes we do that. Sometimes we look at the consequences or the end result, and we're grateful for the hardships that made us who we are today because we share the wealth of our knowledge and stuff. But in our quiet moments, we're like, oh my God, that happened to me, and I was a child.
Yeah.
And really, really, really acknowledging empathy and sympathy for the child that you were when nobody ever offered it to you as a child. You have to offer it to yourself. It's a threshold. It's a real rite of passage to actually walk over that bridge, take yourself by the hand and say, I believe you. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to be this. It sounds cliche. When I hear it, I feel like it's kind of gross and whatever. But so I'm going to go to where his ashes are. My parents are there and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to go there and spend some time there. And I've been back many times because lots of people have died. You get to a certain age, you go to more funerals than weddings.
Right.
But yeah, I want to sit in it. I want to spend the day sitting in nostalgia, and really, 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 really trying to remember him the way I remembered him. I've had dreams that have been quite tactile. But yeah, just spend time with this person I never got to really know and be friends with. And I know we would have been so close.
Yeah. What day did you say that's happening on? The 28th is the anniversary?
28th of September, yeah. He died in 1972. You're going to send me some vibes?
I'm drawing a rose on my calendar to remind me to send you some vibes. I'm going to get your phone number and I'm going to text you.
No, I'm going to cry.
Yeah. Don't save it. They're all going to come out anyway.
You're a
Just
darling.
Save them up.
You're such a darling. And
save them up.
I've always thought that before we chatted on the podcast. But yeah, your transparency is a gift that you give to your viewers. And it's like, I'm a dickhead and this is why. And I think more creators should do that. They sort of say, people are dickheads and this is why. But I think more of us should say, I'm a dickhead and this is why. So it's more relatable.
Yep. One of my closest friends called me an asshole less than 24 hours ago. A fucking asshole. And I said, I completely understand where you're coming from. You asked me earlier what has me so melancholy, and I am in quite a pickle at the moment, a relational pickle. when people are getting hurt. And that's my least favorite thing to do, is hurt people.
Mm.
But when you do,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
you get to live with that.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you cry
It's
so much on the 28th.
It's sometimes worse than when the opposite happens. Like just particularly if you feel misunderstood in that moment.
Yeah. I shoot, man. Like, I mean, like, going back to what you were saying, like, you're grateful for the hardship because of the lessons you learned, right? And you can pass the lessons on to other people who have hardship, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be able to use your voice in a way that resonates with people who are going through what you've gone through. It's nice for them to see someone who's on the other side and can look back and say, you're going to make it.
Mm.
But that doesn't change the fact that my childhood self shouldn't have had to have gone through that in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, like, he still just wants his dad.
Have you done the steps through grief, like in order to feel the feelings, to process your feelings, you got to feel them.
Yep.
Then you do have to get angry.
Yeah,
and
you have to go through all of them.
I was stuck in anger for a while. I did not forgive my mother for a while, for a long time.
Right.
But like both my parents died in the 1980s. So because they got sick, I never let the sun set on that argument. I made them feel that I loved them, that I didn't have any problem with them, and all that sort of stuff. But 10 years after they died, I started having nightmares and whatever that started bringing up things. And particularly at times in my life when I've fallen in love, as much as I love the feeling of falling in love, when it's reciprocated, I immediately feel panic. And that panic is that I don't know what it's like to be loved in all my shades of mess. So in my life, I've thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could meet someone that I could really not just feel accepted by, but really show myself to. I don't know if I've ever done that.
And would you even trust a relational environment where you can?
Yeah.
You know, if someone comes along who is legit safe for you, who is going to honor your feelings, who's going to create a space for you to be your authentic self without fear of judgment or retaliation or anything, like the thing that everybody really wants, whether or not they realize they want it. If you had that, would you even be able to trust it? Would you be able to believe it, or would you be waiting for the other shoe to drop? Because it's probably going to get weaponized. It's always dropped.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And so then like, I've never known a love that wasn't pain. To the point where if there's not pain, I don't trust it as love. Because the first person in my life who told me he loved me hurt me.
Yeah.
And so when someone says they love you, but they're not,
I'm doing this for your own good.
Yeah, it feels like something is missing. Like I don't know that I have it in me to trust a real love that's wholesome, that's healing, that's safe.
Wholesome is the great word.
That's hard. It's hard to deal with, because then if you find that love, what do you do with it? What the fuck do you do with that? Run for the hills is what you do.
Because I'm at an age now, like I've had 32 years of my life were in two relationships. Not simultaneously, concurrently. Consecutively. But I had a lot of single time as well. But for the first time in my life, for the last 3 years, I've been celibate. I haven't tried to date. I haven't all this sort of stuff. I've just, and I've also cut down on my drinking. No shade to what you're doing now. No shade at all. But
Yeah.
I'd gotten myself into an unhealthy habit, and
Yeah.
I realized that I just wanted to get off that merry-go-round. So I did that. It, but the motivation was as much about being healthy, um, which wasn't a motivation enough. The
Right.
real motivation of cutting down was
I can still hear you.
I never wanted to get myself into a situation again where, when I was intoxicated, I had a triggering moment. And I never
Right.
used to have triggering moments when I was intoxicated for the longest time. But when I got to an age where I was suffering from anxiety all the time, being drunk and triggered was a whole other kind of hell. And I was inflicting those feelings on people I was in a texting, like long distance relationship, and we're texting and stuff. And the whole triggering thing and text is a
Yeah.
whole other thing, because text messages, the written word, can be
Mm-mm.
really fraught.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
I have to stop doing that. But also going forward, I'm going to have little people in my life again, like grandchildren.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the most pure, unfettered opportunity for me to be in someone's life with no agenda at all, except to just give unconditional love to that child. Parenting
Yeah.
is like that, but there's also other stuff, because it's your job to make them get to a certain age without accidentally killing them or whatever. Don't
Right.
let them drown in the bath.
Right.
Don't, make sure they can cross the road. There's a lot of responsibility. That's not my
Right.
responsibility. With
Mm-hmm.
As a
Mm-hmm.
grandparent, my only responsibility is to love them, read them stories, tell them
Yes.
stories, sing to them,
Yes.
and listen, and conspire with them against their
Mm-hmm.
parents and do the
Mm-hmm.
fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but I find that spending this time alone for the first time in my life, and without lusting after someone, crushing on someone, or being in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship where I was being driven crazy by someone,
Mm-hmm.
it's just me. Um, I'm doing all the self love now, so that's what I'm sort
Yes.
of trying to put out there on TikTok. Doing all the self love there, but meaning it, like falling in love with myself, being my own best friend.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And if I can nail that, maybe it's possible I could have a healthy relationship, because no one else can hurt me if my best friend has got my back. And that's
Absolutely.
me.
And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to position yourself in your own life as the one person who will always have your back.
Mm,
We tell ourselves so many stories in our society that if you are looking out for yourself and not, that means you're not trusting your partner to look out for you. You know, it's like there's this barrier. It's like it's a hindrance to connection. It's you're not opening up and letting them take care of you. And I can understand where that narrative comes from.
yeah.
But at the same time, what's more beautiful than two people who are in love with themselves and who then have that so much of that love that it overflows and the overflow goes to the other person, you know, like when you have a kid, you know this. It's the weirdest thing. I never experienced anything like this until I had a son. I looked at him. I remember clear as crystal the first time I heard his voice down the hall and the first time I saw his face. I knew him. It's like being reunited with an old friend. And you can feel your own sense of self-preservation extend to that human.
Mm.
Where now, all of a sudden, when you're hungry, you're thinking about if they are fed. When you're cold, you're thinking about if they are clothed. You know? And it
In
just
your head,
happens
you're never
automatically.
alone.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And so imagine you love yourself that way.
Yeah.
And you're partnering with someone who loves themselves that way. And each of your own like evolutionary drives for self-preservation just covers the other person.
Yeah.
Not because you have to, not because you promised you would in front of God and man on an altar, not because you need them for something or because you don't want to be alone or you crave companionship, just because you like them that much. You have this connection, you have this bond where to the extent to which you care for yourself is the extent to which you care for them, but you've learned to care for yourself. You've learned to love yourself, and therefore, through that mechanism, you love them, and they love you.
I don't know if you relate to this, but part of all that childhood trauma is a inherent fear of abandonment, emotional abandonment. When if
Absolutely.
you would know, you would know exactly how I feel, because someone has looked in your eyes who's supposed to love you, and there's anything but love in the eyes, and that stays with you forever. So if anyone looks at you even close to the same way, woo. But when I would meet people, particularly outside of my relationships, because both of the relationships, marriages I was in, were just ill-advised. They just I don't know, they just happen the way they happen. I'm not going to go into great detail there, but what I've discovered in my life is, because of the outward appearance that I have of being confident and hilarious, let's face it, and all of that stuff, that's self-esteem. When I grew into womanhood, I developed a nice figure, and so I got a lot of attention for having a nice figure, and that gave me self-esteem. And other things that I did gave me self-esteem, but it took a while before I realized what I didn't have was self-worth. So I was able to present this shell of a person that I've created, this facade, this self, this Rose Cooper person, the construct of personality in that you do, whether it's in self-defense or on purpose, or it's just a personality that you're born with. But I realized that when I get crushes on people in my day-to-day life, if it feels like an instant connection or whatever, and I feel like they see me, what I do subconsciously is I put that person on a pedestal straight away. Because that person must be really special to like me, because I think they see me in a way that people who thought I was hot, in inverted commas, didn't see me. They saw me as a conquest. But people who liked my sense of humor, thought I was smart, liked spending time with me, gave me the time of day, and didn't make me feel like a sex object or whatever, those people are amazingly special. Never even occurred to me that them seeing me for me was them being observant or having discretion over, or seeing that I was actually a good person. And good is an advised word, nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. I feel like you're going to get it, that some people, and then when you put them on a pedestal, then when something goes wrong, it hurts.
It hurts more
because your ego is wrapped up in that person so much.
You tell yourself you need them for that affirmation. You need them for that validation. Yes. And then when it goes south, you start to doubt every good thing you saw in yourself because of them. And it's somehow worse than if you had never seen it in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That person has to want me. That person has to love me. Right. Because if they don't, my house of cards is just going to... my self-worth, gone. So developing this awareness of how self-worth differs to self-esteem, and I am not a psychologist. I've never been to university. I don't know. So I'm talking out of my ass, but this is just the way this is the language that I use. Self-esteem is one thing. Like, I can get up and talk in front of a room full of people. I can sing in front of a room full of people. I can make a tit of myself in front of a room full of people.
Right.
But talk to them the way I'm talking to you now is like, this is a four-leaf clover we've just found. You know, this is a golden moment we're having. where I get to talk real talk with you and feel like I'm actually in my pocket now, and
Yeah.
realize that I have developed self-worth around my opinions and my ability
Mm-hmm.
to articulate that
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Yes.
No one has to tell me
Yes.
that. I can actually tell myself that now, which is
That's
what?
amazing. That's amazing. Like self-worth, I remember the first time I started going to therapy and I was confronted with the idea of intrinsic self-worth, and it didn't make mathematical sense to me. It didn't make sense. I didn't understand how it was possible. Or if everybody has intrinsic self-worth, then is worth even worth giving any credence to? Or is it like the boomers and their reaction to the idea that everybody gets a participation trophy? Does it have any meaning if you don't have to earn it? You know?
I have a thing about that, yeah.
And then I started deciding to believe, just deciding to believe that I'm worth something, not because of what I do, not because of what I can do, not because of what I've done, not because of how I make people feel or the value I add to their lives. That I just have worth. And it is insane how hard a pill that is to swallow.
Mm.
When you're left to your own devices, you need someone else to tell you that until you don't.
Mm.
You know, it's all part of the process. You have to find someone who makes you feel worth something, and you have to have that revoked in order to learn the lesson that no one will ever make you feel that way but yourself.
Mm.
And that's when you start to learn what it feels like to actually do that for yourself. I'm really starting to believe that there is no such thing as finding self-worth until you're on the other side of heartbreak. It's a part of the
I
journey.
think too, when you learn to
Yeah.
forgive yourself for whatever it is, even if it's something that you didn't have to forgive yourself for. Like a lot of the fuck ups that you make is just being human.
Yeah.
Everybody fucks up. Everybody is a
Yeah.
train wreck in some way, shape, or form. So forgiving yourself is kind of redundant, but only if you see it that way. But when you do truly forgive yourself, and with me having adult children and some of the things that I have done that they know about, as a single woman
Right.
or whatever, my male children, I could judge myself based on that whole patriarchal thing. I'm talking about
Yeah.
dating younger men and stuff, you know.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
uh, and no, I owned it at the time, and whatever problem they had with it, I figured they'll figure it out. One day they'll figure it out. They'll
Right.
just look at me as a human being, and 10 years down the track, that's happening. They're seeing that they're in their 30s now, and they're realizing that I've my brain works in a certain way, and it understands consequences and misplaced guilt and judgment and all this. They're processing it. They
Yes.
look at me, and now we're a human. We have friendship. I'm still a parent, but now it's kind of, oh, mom, you're so cute, rather than
Right.
anybody that they have to defer to or anything.
There's a whole person in there that exists independent of the role they play in anyone else's life.
Yeah.
And that is a tough thing to uncover. And you're talking about people discovering that about you, but how often do we not even discover that about ourselves? Like, I have a
Mm.
comment here. Jam Saucy. I don't know your actual name, but she says, I'm on the fence about it. Maybe some people aren't worth anything. Couldn't I just be a filler? And I have an allergic reaction to that concept. There's no such thing as a person who's just filler. You're not an NPC in someone else's video game. You're not an
Yeah.
extra in their movie. There is no such
Yeah.
thing as that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only reason most of the people who are here are only here because I made a TikTok one time about finding out who I was outside of the roles I played in other people's lives, right? And that's fucking scary because most people, if they take those off, there's not a person left. All you
Yeah.
are, at some point in your life, all you are is the role you play in other people's lives. See, people say, who are you? And you start describing who you are to other people, who you are for other people, who you are
Yeah.
because of other people. And when you discover what is at the bottom of that, when you take away the role that you play in other people's lives, every other person, the person that is there aside from who everybody else sees when they look at you,
Yeah.
that's where you find your value, because that's where you find who you are.
Mm.
And the only way to really discover your value is to find yourself, find who you are, find the person you were before anyone told you who to be, or told you who you weren't allowed to be, or who you had to be, you know? And when you find that person, you find your value. Because that's when you really discover the unique offering that you are to the world, to nature, to the universe. That you find the reason that the universe would be different if you had never been born.
How old is your son now?
My son's 4.
Right.
He's the size of a 6-year-old, but he's 4 years old.
My almost 32-year-old got married last week, and
your outfit was awesome, by the way, for that wedding.
Thank you.
That was amazing.
I worked on that. I'm definitely not a fashion person, so
you
for me to pull that together.
Fuck out of that outfit.
Thank you. Thank you. I was feeling myself, I got to say. And dancing in a suit, when you're a woman, and you're dancing in a suit, you dance differently than, you know, I was kind of channeling David Byrne at one stage, doing the big suits. It was fun.
It's a different silhouette. It's a different spectacle, and you play it up. Yeah, absolutely.
I was earning my masculine energy and all that sort of jazz. But what I was going to say to you is, because part of the thing was I had to make a speech and stuff, and contemplating what to say.
Sure.
But I didn't, sometime, like at my older son's wedding, I did a lot of taking photos and filming. For this one, I decided to sit in it and just absorb it all. And watching him, and I've always known this about my children, but this was never more evident than seeing him on display in a way that he's not normally accustomed to, like actually declaring himself. He's very, he's a performer, but he's also an introvert. So to see him holding her hands and repeating after me and having those moments where he was being self-conscious, but displaying the fact that he's a cool person, a person who just is in the moment and knows what to say and has good, funny things and comebacks and whatever. He's been that person, Ryan, since he was 4. So I'm looking at him, glimpsing the same kid that I saw at his first school assemblies, kind of walking around, being a little bit sort of cooler than shit, and he's like 4 years old. And I've always said this from the time, even when my kids were infants, something about the personalities, whether they get frustrated easily, whether they're calm, whether they're this, is evident from infancy. So there is an intrinsic person in there. And absolutely. I noticed with myself, coming full circle back to who I was or who I thought I wanted to be when I was very young. Like I was surrounded by the hippie movement and all that sort of stuff when I was a kid. And I wanted to be, free love sounded good to me and all that sort of stuff. But it kind of then let me down straight away. I'm going off on so many tangents, but
I'm following you because I
the thing is, I think I'm undiagnosed ADHD, just to say.
I would 1,000% believe that.
But I'm like, when I bounced back particularly after my second divorce, I bounced back, found a community. It was a hippie community, but immediately I could place it. I was like 14 again. Before someone told me, when life still had possibilities and I was still curious about the things I was curious about before my first husband and other people sort of made me focus on other things, being self-conscious about whether or not I was good enough for this, looked good enough for that or whatever. All I had was curiosity for the world, for life, for the potential of the human brain, for the potential of love, all of this stuff. Curious, unadulterated, let's just live the shit out of this life, you know, but from an emotional perspective, as more so than anything else. But that was kind of moved to one side, and now I've brought it back again. But doing it on my own, I'm sort of having those joyful moments with my kids, and lately I've been questioning whether or not I should invite love back into my life so that we can have a witness to this cool stuff that's happening in my life right now, and I can witness theirs. But I don't think I've drawn her back out again into the light since. While in the last few years, I think I've been introverted and in a cocoon, and the pandemic and all that happened. But
sure.
But yeah, I feel like, oh, maybe I should give her more oxygen. So what I'm equating that to when you're talking about things is like, A, pay attention to your son now, because the basic structure of who he is there.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, yeah.
Absolutely. You know what's funny is, like, he's 4, and every now and then he'll make a face that he made when he was 8 years old. And I know that I'll see that face when he's 18. I'll see that face when he's 35. I'll see that face, and he won't. And my mom would always talk about, no matter how old I was, she would always see me as this little tiny baby child. And I for the longest time, I thought I was being infantilized. I thought my maturity was being sidestepped. And then now, as a parent, I realize that what she's saying is, I see who you really are. I've always seen it. I saw who you were before you decided that you had to be something. And every now and then I see little glimpses of that person.
There's another one of those quotes. So there's that. Put it in context of him, and also for you, put yourself in the context of who that child was when you can remember joy, and bring him out more than maybe you are at the moment.
Oh man!
And savor that just as much as savoring what you're doing now. This is what I struggle with, is savoring that joy and encouraging the joy and really pushing for more joy. I get totally I procrastinate and dissociate and do all the other stuff.
I had a moment when you were talking. I had a moment because I realized my dad's gone, but my mom's still alive, and I can actually go to her and ask her, that kid that you always saw in me, that you see in me right now, what is he like? What is that kid like?
Yeah, she could probably give you a lot of insight.
He's the person I'm still working to rediscover and reclaim. You know, like, you go on this journey to shed the parts of yourself that were never yours in the first place. They were projected onto you. They were mandated of you. They were demanded of you. And then you also go on this journey to reclaim the parts of yourself that you abandoned because they weren't allowed to be expressed, right?
Yeah.
But doing all that backwards, you may hit close to the bullseye, but how can you if you don't see the bullseye? But that person you were before anyone told you who to be, is the bullseye. That's who you're trying to find.
It's very analogous too. Like, it applies to childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And stuff, but it also applies to, like, you spend 30 years being told about societal stuff, patriarchy, racism, all that sort of stuff. So all piled on it, and then you peel it away after 30. I think you absorb all the bullshit, and then you spend the next 30 years peeling the bullshit away.
Right, realizing it's bullshit and getting rid of it piece by piece as it shows its ugly head.
Yeah.
The most
getting better glasses so you can see things more clearly.
Absolutely. And who to see you more clearly than the person who brought you into this world?
Yeah. Life is hard. If you work off that as the bar, life is hard, then you're kicking goals every time it's not. And you elevate those experiences of just lifing without worrying as that's when life is good. If you're not worrying about things, if you're learning not to sweat the bad stuff and stuff, life is good, and you need to give yourself more points for that, because life is suffering. Life is shit. Life is hard. Everyone has it hard to a certain degree. Obviously, people have it a lot tougher than we do. We're very privileged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've
There's
definitely covered some ground.
There's a lot of good moments here.
Yeah. Yeah, we've definitely covered some ground. This is a good one.
It's your first TikTok.
Ah! Yes. Oh, I'm way too drunk to throw my head back. Thank you, Rose, for sharing yourself with me. Not just now, but the entirety of our time that we have actually been in contact with each other. You've been nothing but a gift to me.
I'm so glad that you found me. I found you a year ago.
I'm so glad you found me.
Found me back.
Yeah, and after having not gone live since like April, this was the best case scenario I could have possibly imagined for breaking back in.
It worked.
Yeah.
It worked for me too.
You are a gem. You are a gem.
Back at ya.
Yeah.
And I got to give you props for your hair as well. Everyone's giving you props, but you got this Elvis thing happening at the moment, and it's
yeah, it is.
Thank you very much. It's working.
Yeah, I'm gonna go pass the fuck out. But everybody else who was here, thank you.
Big
Thank
hugs
you for helping me break back in. Big hugs. I'm gonna hug myself and pretend I'm hugging you.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
We're going to do this again. I look forward to parts 3 and 4 of me being on your podcast at some point.
Yeah. Oh, we only scratched the surface. We have to
that was
subjects and try and stick
that was
to
all
them.
the intro. Yes, absolutely. Until next time,
Okay.
Rose. See you all.
Bye.
Goodbye.